with our current students before we planned this day and said, we want to have a faculty member come and speak, so who do you think is the faculty member? And they assured me that Dr. Hoagland is the guy that we want to have talk to you today, because he is phenomenal. So I'm going to allow him to introduce himself. He's going to spend some time today talking to you about his experiences here at the medical college and all the great things we do here. So without further ado, Dr. Hoagland.
No pressure, though. Well, you all look much more comfortable now than you did last time around. I appreciate you ditching those black suits. I hope you're enjoying the day so far. Like Jennifer had said, my name is Todd Hoagland. I'm the course director for the clinical human anatomy class here. I'm also the M1 curriculum leader, so the new discovery curriculum. I've been in charge of the first year. And then I'm also in charge of the anatomical gifts program. So I wear many hats at the institution, and I've been here now about a year and a half. So I'm relatively new, and I think my perspective might kind of help you out some, because you never know in transitions to new places what it's going to be like. But I can assure you that my transition was really pretty phenomenal. The people at the medical college here, I think, are the crown jewel of the institution. And when I say people, I don't mean the faculty or the staff or the students. I mean everybody. Everybody kind of treats you with a lot of kindness. People are very generous with their time and talents. Students are outstanding. Then again, I've kind of had that same experience teaching at medical schools wherever I've been. But the students here are really pretty special. So today, I'm going to share a few things with you. Basically, we've been doing lots of stuff to overhaul the curriculum, and I would imagine that that's probably one of the biggest issues on most of your minds. I'm going to take a little different approach than I think some of the folks that were speaking earlier in the day, in that I just don't want all of you to come here no matter what. I want you to come here because you believe that this is the right place for you and that you're going to come here and thrive. We want people that want to be here, that want to be successful, that think the medical college is doing things for the right reasons, and to get engaged, to get out there and to work in the community, to get involved, to be not only a student here, but to be a part of our academic community, and to make strong contributions. So I think that that's one thing that the medical college does really well. They give everybody opportunities, and it kind of, you make the most of it, and you get out of it exactly what you put into it. So I heard a few questions earlier today, and I'd like to drill down on some of those a little bit more. One of the questions that I thought was really good was, because I've heard it a few hundred times, why are you changing your curriculum? The students do really well, they get great residency spots, so why do you change? And it's not all about these days about just the content. It's not about learning the material and mastering the science, but it's also getting intimately involved with the art of medicine. And it's a lot harder to teach that when all you do is lecture at students. When students sit in the classroom all day and all they hear is lecture after lecture, you don't get to see the humanistic side of folks. You don't get to see the compassion and the caring. There shouldn't be this natural break of you have 2 years of basic science and then you go and you start becoming a doctor. The part about doctoring starts on day one. It starts the day that you wear the white coat, the very first day during the white coat ceremony. We treat you as colleagues from that day on. It's not an undergraduate experience anymore. You've already done that. You've proven to us that you belong, or you wouldn't be here right now. You have some difficult decisions now to make relative to what schools you might want to go to. But I can say that the medical college is a pretty outstanding place to be. So if you do choose us, welcome to the family, and we'll do our best to help you achieve excellence. So why do you change? There's a number of things. The hidden curriculum is a good part of that. How do you socialize and inculcate the new group of medical students to learn how to do everything that's necessary to be an outstanding physician? You need to expose them to what physicians do day in and day out. We had a lot of experiences with our pilot curriculum that was wildly successful in a lot of ways, and that was, I think, the biggest success was pairing up clinicians and basic scientists. It was some of the most potent faculty development I'd ever had. So for a year, I worked in the trenches side by side with a bunch of outstanding clinicians. And every day they came into the classroom, they came in and they carried themselves with the comportment you would expect of a really outstanding physician. They walked in with their heads held high, with their ties on nice and tight, with their white coats. The women were all dressed very professional, as if they could go in and see patients. They could be ready to deliver bad news or treat patients at a moment's notice. And that's, I think, what's missing in a lot of traditional curriculums across the country, because the clinical piece comes later, and here it comes right from the beginning, which is great. There's also that threat of governmental regulation. The LCME, the Liaison Committee of Medical Education, they go around and they accredit medical schools, and they do that according to a number of criteria. And as Dean Kirshner had mentioned earlier today, we just did an outstanding job with our accreditation. We got the full 8-year reaccreditation, and that's a feather in the cap for the institution and for all the people that have worked very hard to make that happen. But in my mind, it's not enough. Just getting the accreditation is one thing. I think that a lot of people can pull that off. The other thing is, are you doing things for the right reason? And the LCME is drilling down on that further now. They're mandating that you can't just have a completely traditional lecture-heavy curriculum and be accredited anymore. They won't allow that. They're looking for people to start nurturing the competencies, the competencies of being a physician. And how do you do that? You can't do it with a multiple choice test alone. You can test medical knowledge that way, sure, but there's a lot more to it than that. So there are government regulations that force change. There are people that have great ideas that affect change. There are opportunities. The opportunities come from being in the right place at the right time or responding to the right governmental roles. And the bottom line is, the community, the medical college itself, decided that we needed to do something a bit differently. To not just graduate students and just not to say that, you know, they are MCW graduates, they're competent. We wanted to start nurturing students from the get-go. And to do that, you have to become better. We wanted the students to become better problem solvers. We wanted the students to be able to analyze data, use best practices. How do you know if the drugs you're giving are the right drugs, and why should you be giving it? What's the evidence? Will this maximize the outcomes of your patients? And those are tough things to determine on multiple choice tests, so we wanted to do more. 28 of our 204 students participated in the pilot curriculum, which started in 2010. Since it started in 2010, we had been working on it, or the faculty members had been working on it for years before that. I showed up in July, right before the rollout in August, so it was a bit of a wild ride at first. But it was fun, and we did some really neat stuff. It was a completely integrated curriculum, such that it was all modular based. It was based on the domains that the National Board of Medical Examiners describes as the domains necessary to achieve medical competence. So therefore, the curriculum here was designed with the end goal in mind. When you finish your second year, you'll go and you'll take the USMLE Step 1 exam. And when you take that exam, your hope is that you're going to blow the top off this thing so that you can then have your residency of choice. And we understand that. It's an important exam. So how do you maximize student success on that? You take a look at what the MBME says is the most important thing and what guides them in creating their exam, and then you tailor a curriculum such that you can check all those boxes off. We're not teaching to that test, but we're setting students up so that they can be maximally effective on that exam, while also learning everything else along the way to be outstanding. This curriculum was systems-based. There were no lectures. It was all team-based learning. So every single day was a day when you'd come into a room like this, sit down, and hash out a lot of clinically relevant problems. Every night you'd go home and do homework. Every day, the following day you'd come back. You'd take an exam, a quick 5-6 question exam, just showing that you were ready for the day. You did the reading, you were prepared, and then we would go through all kinds of application exercises to force students to apply the information immediately after learning it. And that was really cool. And working with clinicians to come up with all those clinical scenarios was awesome. So we were able to immediately put the content in a context where a student saw its relevance. How many times have you been in a class and you sat there and you were learning something and you thought, boy, why the heck am I learning this, you know? And you think, how long did that stick? You know, like the monsoons in the desert. The water comes down, it runs off, and it's gone. Here, we were making students apply the information immediately. And a basic scientist, I earned my PhD from the University of Notre Dame, and I've never practiced medicine. I've been alongside a lot of people that have, but when I tell a student, you know, this is really important, they think, okay. And then the clinician next to me says, listen, this is really important. I had a patient come in the other day and they were blah, 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 and students like, oh my gosh. I'm thinking, oh yeah, great. But we get the gravitas from inviting the clinicians in, and that was one of the greatest things of our new curriculum. The module directors of each one of the units of the old curriculum were a basic scientist and a MD alike. And this happened between 2010 and now. So that group is just gearing up to take their USMLE Step 1 exam, and my prediction is they are going to blow the top off it. They have been learning information for 2 years. They have been preparing every night like there was an exam the next day. You know, type A medical students, you know what that's like. You don't go into an exam thinking, you know, if I pass, that'll be cool. You're looking to rock it, every one of them. These students have been studying hard, and they understand why they're studying, and so I predict they're going to do well. There were a lot of challenges to that, though, and some of the challenges are that not all students come to the medical college or to medical school in general with the same skill set. We have English majors and music majors and science majors, and it's a tough group to work with right out of the gate because of the discrepancy in knowledge. So what we decided to do after we learned all these lessons along the way with the pilot, we decided to hybridize our curriculum such that we could take the best of our traditional curriculum and the best of the pilot, put them together, and that's what we're rolling out this August. And I'm confident it's going to be outstanding because we have cherry-picked the things that work the absolute best from the two curricula, and we've put them together. It will start with a discipline-based first year where you'll actually be sitting in classrooms just like most of you did throughout your undergraduate years. You'll take a discipline-based course, you'll learn all that content. After you learn that, you'll go and you'll take exams to show you're competent. We've taken that a step further, though, because we didn't want this just to be a very traditional beginning to medical school. So we have taken the courses, we've stacked them side by side, we've harmonized all the content such that when you're taking the physiology course, you'll be learning about the hemodynamics of the heart, and then you'll go and you'll do the dissection of the heart in the gross anatomy lab, and then you'll go to your molecules and cell course and you'll learn about cardiac muscle. So we have 3 separate courses that are running in parallel with content that's been harmonized. It's not perfect, it doesn't match up all the time because of obvious discrepancies in the overall disciplines, but every chance we found to harmonize the content we did. And so from a student perspective, it will feel very integrated. It's still separate tests, and assessment drives learning, and medical students know that more than any other group. So the exams will still be independent, but the fact is the learning will take place in a very integrated and rich environment. The faculty know what each other is teaching these days. We know who's teaching what on what days. We know how to play off of each other. We can say, Dr. So-and-so talked about the hemodynamics of the ventricles the other day. Now we're going to do the dissection today, and it'll be a really tight learning experience. We used specific design principles in coming up with our curriculum, and that's number one, we had to make sure that we were going to satisfy all the LCME accreditation standards. That's a no-brainer. We also wanted to ensure that we had early clinical exposure, and so students start to see patients from the very first weeks of medical school. We wanted to make sure the integration of basic and clinical sciences was very tight, and we still are working closely with all the clinicians we brought in for the pilot curriculum, which is going to ensure that that does happen. We wanted to build on the strengths of MCW, and there were many. The traditional curriculum had lots of real highlights. And so we wanted to make sure we kept those going. We also wanted to make sure it was a competency-based curriculum, which is a real challenge. If you'll see on this slide, the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education, they've published 6 different competencies, patient care, medical knowledge, and so on. You can read those. And medical knowledge is easy. That's low-hanging fruit for a basic scientist in a discipline-based course. Here's a list of stuff to know. Learn that. I'm going to test you on it. Did you learn it? You got the knowledge. You're competent. There's number 2. And then you go to professionalism. You start thinking, how the heck am I going to deal with that? You know? And you can't do it with a multiple choice exam. And then you look at patient care. Well, that's no multiple choice exam. There's lots of things here that you just can't do with the traditional ways that medical school has been taught. So you have to think about new ways of approaching that. And so that was a real challenge for us. So the need for change. Why did we really want to do this? We needed to enhance learning and critical thinking, certainly problem-solving skills. You don't go into a clinic and see a patient and say, that's the biceps. It's innervated by the musculocutaneous nerve. The patient walks in and their arm's hanging down at their side and they're like, Doc, I can't move my arm. That's a problem, and you need to solve that. So why not start challenging students with problems right from the get-go of medical school? We'll give you the content, absolutely. We'll teach it to you thoroughly, and we'll allow you to map it in the way that you see fit so you understand it best. But then we're going to continuously pepper you with problems from day one to make sure that you can start using your critical thinking skills to answer questions, to attend to the sick patients that come into your clinics. So, and that's a real key. We also wanted to enhance the performance on the USMLE Step 1 and 2. Our students do very well, and they do place well. They can do better. And our goal is to make sure that everybody does outstanding. We want everybody in this room, everybody that comes through the medical college, to get the residency of their choice. And the one way to do that is to ensure that they can do really well on this exam. And so we've used the lessons from the pilot curriculum to roll out our new curriculum, so that's possible. We wanted to enhance the recruitment of medical students. I personally would like to see the Medical College of Wisconsin the #1 medical school in the U.S. You know, I always believe if you're going to hit your goal, you got to aim a little bit above it. So shoot for the stars and see what happens. One of the ways that you can positively affect change in the reputation of a school is to bring in the absolute best students in the nation. If you can do that, you're in pretty good shape. Match results, we obviously want to take care of that. The reputation will follow, I believe. New research has been showing from adult learning that there are different ways to do it. Adults don't learn best by sitting on their backsides in a lecture hall being lectured at for 8 hours a day. It's just not the way it works. It doesn't stick. So there is a whole volume of literature now that shows how we can do it better, and the pilot curriculum was a great opportunity for us to start thinking about how to do that. And to make all this happen, we have to update the facilities. And for those of you who've been walking around the halls of the medical college, you'll realize there's lots of construction projects underway. And it's a super exciting time. I'll get back to the gross anatomy lab construction a little bit later. And you'll also notice, and I don't know if everyone has had an opportunity to go out and take a look at the renovation boards out near the cafeteria, but we're adding, I think it's over 130 new student study spaces. So all the little nooks and crannies of the university will now be filled with busy students studying away and faculty sitting down in comfy chairs drinking coffee, and it will be a beautiful incubator for people to sit down and do some learning the way that they want it done. If you want to go to the library, that's cool. If you want to go and sit down in one of these study spaces, that's great. If you want to go home, that's fine too. However you want to do it, we're going to create those spaces for you. So some of the things that we asked ourselves when we were thinking about the curriculum, how can we foster the knowledge, skills, attitudes, behaviors that physicians need to practice medicine? How do we instill in the students a love of learning? You know, we don't want you to just do the minimum amount to pass exams. We want you to do everything possible to ace everything that you ever do, and to have this passion to solve the problems that come your way. And you can't do that by having a faculty member spoon feeding you stuff or having somebody telling you all the answers. You do it by grappling with really challenging dilemmas and problems. And you do it by developing that thirst to be the one with the answers. which is not an easy task. We also want to figure out how to balance cutting-edge, evidence-based medical science with that relationship-centered art that is medicine's distinctive trademark. And that's a challenge to teach, but the best way to do that is with outstanding mentors. The Pathway program is going to help us do that, matching students one-on-one with people in the basic science or clinical trenches. We have a lot of clinicians coming into the classroom these days, and that mentoring is going to help out an awful lot. And it's going to be a 4-year evolution of your levels of competency to make that happen. So we're going to make sure we understand that we need to use adult learning theory to drive how we do things. And just as a quick schematic, you can see here that the traditional curriculum at MCW, while outstanding, didn't do a great job getting early clinical exposure. So the students had a while before they actually started seeing the relevance. And so we had a couple years of basic sciences and behavioral science, and then they moved into clinical science. And now what we see is more of a stair-step approach, where the clinical relevance is apparent from the get-go with a lot more basic science up front. And then the basic science comes back in years 3 and 4 through electives and selectives and mini tutorials during clerkships. And it's going to be a great way to make sure that you understand the clinical relevance of the basic science content. We're looking to transform learners into independent, self-directed, problem-solving machines. And I think that that's going to be a bit of a challenge, but I think it's attainable. We're looking to integrate the curriculum in all ways, within individual semesters, within the clinical and basic science years. We want to deconstruct those old paradigms. We're going to hybridize, between the traditional and the pilot curriculum with the new discovery curriculum, such that there will be a fair mix of lectures with team-based learning opportunities, small group learning sessions, problem-based learning. We're going to mix it up pretty nicely, because I think any one way of doing things alienates a whole bunch of other people. So there's lots of different learning styles in students, and we need to tap into all that. Obviously, we need a greater focus on active learning rather than passive listening. And we want to make sure that we give students ample time to learn on their own. So like Dr. Franco had said this morning, we'll provide 4 half-days a week in the first semester of medical school, 3 half-days free for semesters 2 and 3, so the spring of the first year and the fall of the second year, and then again 3 half-days free in the 4th semester or the spring of the second year. So that means that instead of being in class kind of 9 to 5-ish during the week, you're going to have 3 or 4 half-days completely free with no content, and that's protected time. And we're considering that an important thing to defend. We don't want things to creep into that open space. We want students to have that time to learn at your own pace and to do things the way you feel will maximize the way you learn information. You're all familiar with these learning pyramids, and here's one that kind of just shows sitting in the lecture hall, you're really not going to retain a ton. Now, don't get me wrong, there are brilliant lecturers, and I'm sure that it goes way up past 5%. But even so, it's not going to approach the level of competence that you would find if you grappled with information, you solved some problems, and then you tried explaining it to somebody else. It's just, there's no comparison. So we're shooting to make the learning higher impact. And adult learning theory tells us a number of things. And the most important is we should focus on students learning rather than faculty teaching. It shouldn't be about what's the quickest way I can get this done. It should be about what's the best way to optimize student learning. And so there's lots of different ways to do that. We want it to be interactive. We want you to solve problems. It should be practical so you can see the relevance. Adults are also relevancy oriented. So if you give them problems, here's a clinical vignette, this person has problem X, we need you to solve it. That shows the relevancy, and it shows why you would need to solve those things. So adult learning, there's tons of information about it, and we're really pushing hard to make sure we use those principles in designing of the curriculum. So then, curriculum successes. I know it hasn't been launched yet. I just like to wave the flag every chance I get. So the pilot curriculum has been going on for a couple years, and we've learned a ton. We've learned things that don't work. We've learned things that do. These are the things that I think have been most successful. And that's the integration of content. By pulling in all the clinicians and having them work side by side with the basic scientists. Even if there was a genuine lack of desire to have faculty development, you can't avoid it. When the basic scientist says, oh, you know, this is important, and the clinician says, well, you know, that's a little less important than I've seen. It's an important concept, but maybe more important is this. You think, oh, okay, I'll change that next year. And we've had some awesome experiences coming up with applications where you could tell the clinicians didn't quite know exactly why they did what they did, and we didn't know why the patients looked the way they did because the basic science is like this. And we'd sit down and we'd hash it out, and then there was just clarity. It's a lot easier to teach something when you really understand it, rather than like the hand waving. Okay, if you do this, that happens. No questions. We've also, I think, revitalized kind of some of the educator's mission. You know, you can create anything. If anybody's had any experiences teaching, you should recognize that the first year is like the toughest. You can kind of put things together and it's brutal. You know, what am I going to teach? How am I going to do it? How am I going to sequence this stuff? What's the important content? And then the second year, no matter how it kind of went the first year, it's mainly done. And you think, boy, you know, I could spend a whole bunch of time diving back in, but it's kind of done. And you know, there are times when you can let that roll out for a couple years or a couple decades. And this was a way to really freshen things up. And it was awesome. We were able to really do some genuinely cool things. And it provided a really outstanding, I think, faculty development for clinicians and basic scientists alike. Assessments need to better match the learning outcomes and the expectations. Assessment always drives learning. That's just how it goes. If we saw on the pilot that we didn't assess something, the students didn't do it. And you'd say, you know, it's really important, you should do that. And they'd just say matter-of-factly, well, why don't you test us on it? And say, okay, I'll do that. And then we do that. And then they'd say, oh man, now we got to study that. Yeah, you do. Thanks for that little tidbit of information. We certainly want better problem-solving skills, and this new curriculum has done that. When you challenge students all the time, and medical students are awesome, they'll figure out eventually that the problem-solving is the key. We really don't want you to just memorize a whole bunch of facts. We want you to be able to utilize them. This has also rejuvenated kind of the promotion process at the medical college. So if you really can elevate education to scholarship, and you can do it well, and you can learn from your mistakes, and you can publish the reasons in national journals as far as what you've learned and what really works, you can now be promoted and tenured, and that's an important thing. It's an incentive for educators to really bring their A game into every kind of teaching engagement, which is a beautiful thing. We certainly have also had a focus on medical education scholarship, and the Pathways program is a beautiful example of that. The Pathways program was the impetus for 204 medical students a year to go out and find cool projects. And so you have people beating down your door, I really am interested in something. And you're like, yeah, well, I got a lot of interest too. Let's get this going. And there's a lot of community outreach. There's just tons of stuff going on, which I think is really going to elevate not only the reputation of MCW, but it's going to start providing individual students with opportunities to figure out what they want to do for a living, to get a couple of publications, to land that residency slot of choice. It has so many far-reaching implications that are just really phenomenal. And then there's that halo effect. Once you start doing something and it works and people are really excited about that cool experience and those good outcomes start to affect a lot of other things. I have a bunch of collaborations now with clinicians, people that have always said, you know, when I'm operating, every now and then I cut this nerve, but it doesn't do what I think it's going to do. And then we say, well, why don't we go and take a look at that in the gross anatomy lab? And then we'll go and we'll do the dissections and we'll kind of write that up, and it really is pretty phenomenal. So the number of collaborations that have come out of this has really been pretty amazing. So those were my 2 cents about curriculum issues. I think my take-home message is it's a non-issue. If anybody was concerned that the curriculum might not be ready, it is ready. This curriculum has been tried and tested. The traditional has been rolled out and it's been outstanding for decades, and the pilot curriculum has allowed us really valuable opportunities to learn how to do team-based learning very well and to figure out the limitations of how to use it and how often to use it, and we're ready to go. A couple things that I am passionate about and very excited about. When I first got here, we had a gross anatomy lab that was built in the 1970s, and I hate to say it, but it didn't look like much had been done to it since. It was pretty antiquated, and it wasn't exactly inspiring. Now, we have a brand new gross anatomy lab which is coming online. As we speak, there are guys that are breaking their backs up there, demolishing walls and putting in all the new technology. It is a beautiful thing. This right now, so if you take a look here, you can see the floor plan of the gross anatomy space. The floor plan itself, let's see here, you can see that on the left-hand side here, so on the left-hand side over here, you can see that outlined in red will be the footprint of the area where the new gross anatomy lab is going to be. In the past, the old gross anatomy lab itself was just this area in red. So the old gross anatomy lab was that. The new gross anatomy lab is now going to be over here. You can see that in the top right-hand corner over here, we actually have a locker room. The locker room will now be able to accommodate 300 students, 150 boys and girls. You can come in, you can change before you go into the gross anatomy lab. You can then do your dissections, and when you're done, you can come out and take a nice warm shower before you go see patients or go home to the loved ones, which is a beautiful thing. In the past, the students used to come out of the lab and kind of strip down in the hallways and go off and do their thing. It wasn't exactly the most professional, but it got the job done. You can also see that now this will all be the gross anatomy lab itself. So students will work in this space. And then next to that, you can see that we have an annex, and we'll have a 50-seat classroom, which is right there, so that if we have a radiologist that comes into the gross anatomy lab, the radiologist can come in, go into the side annex. Students from each of the dissection teams can cycle off. They can then go over and they can learn radiological correlations to the anatomy that we're learning of the day. Those same images that the radiologist is using there can be beamed to all the various monitors in the gross anatomy lab, which you can see on the various pillars all around. On the next slide, you can see if you come into the lab through the locker room and you look straight ahead, you're now seeing a whole bank of windows on the southern end of the room, which is here. You can see all the LCD monitors around the room. And more or less, this is going to be the footprint. I know that you don't know what it looked like before, but trust me, it's a dramatic difference. It'll be state-of-the-art facility where we'll have great interconnectivity between the classroom and the laboratory. We'll be able to do teleconferences eventually where we can plumb in information from the surgical theater. We have a radiological suite in the 50-seat classroom, so a radiologist can come in. They can pull up films that they saw that morning and show them in the class. They can beam them on all the tables to all the screens in the laboratory. We can show dissection videos, we can show dissection instructions. It's going to be high tech and it'll be a really cool experience. I am the director of the clinical human anatomy course, so it's something that's near and dear to my heart. We have about 36 clinicians that come in to help us with the course. We have we have 8 hand surgeons that come in on the days that we do dissections of forearm and hand, and they just kind of go about their business. And hand surgeons are some of the most challenging people to pry away from the operating room because they're busy, and it's something where their time is certainly much more lucrative in the OR than it is in the gross anatomy lab. But we have tons of clinicians that come in, otolaryngologists, ophthalmologists. We have pathologists that come in on days when we open up the thorax and the belly. We have family practice docs, we have sports medicine fellows that come in and they help with the extremities, tons of orthopedic surgeons that are coming in, and it's just a really fun and vibrant place to train and study, and I think that you'll really enjoy that. In addition, we have a new interactive classroom. So this interactive classroom will be in the north stacks of the library, and that's pretty close to the computer instruction lab if anybody's been up on the 3rd floor. We're cleaning out a section of the library, and this will be an area where we can do team-based learning or small group tutorials. It can be an area where students can go and study independently on your own if you'd like. There will be a fair amount of technology in this room as well, such that team-based learning, to make that work, you need to have a microphone at every table. You have to have digital interfaces such that students can interact with the classroom as a whole. We're piloting iPads and their use in presentations in the classroom, so I don't have to stand next to the podium anymore. I can move around a little bit. These things are new and we're still kind of working the bugs out on all of them, but it's a great way to kind of not have that sage on the stage anymore, but instead have somebody who can come out into the masses and kind of help you solve problems and figure out some of the challenges that students are having at their tables. It also changes the focus from everyone sitting there kind of saying, oh, there's that guy over there, you know, kind of talking at the podium, to something which is a little more dynamic and easier to manage. So that will be our the technology room. And then we have kind of the center mutts area, and the center mutts used to be kind of black soapstone lab benches, very cold, a lot of steel, a lot of orange paint and yellow stuff that looks like it really got an overhaul in the 70s and it was forgotten. Now it's going to be these really vibrant rooms that you can have patient encounters in. If we take a look at the next slide here, you can see a floor plan of that. And so you can see that in these areas, each one of those rooms was broken up into these nodes, such that the nodes themselves now are smaller, and you can put up dividers, as you can see here. And those dividers would allow patients to be working with standardized patients on one side and also on the other. You can see that these spaces are convertible now, so you can use them to have a smaller interactive classes. You can have conference type things, and then we can also do secure testing in these spaces, and that's something that's coming. We won't be able to do that most likely until the spring semester of the first year. So when you first get here, you won't be able to do that kind of stuff, but it will happen during your tenure for sure. And then this is the overall timeline. So it's just a nice way to realize that we're doing this all for you. If you see, it's all going to be done before August. So everything that we have going on, all of the student study spaces, which you can see here, that's going to be done quickly. We were also doing that for our current traditional students. The last thing we wanted to do was have major renovations going on in the library and other places around the campus while they were studying for the USMLE Step 1 exam. And so we're doing everything possible to minimize the impact on that group while also preparing to make sure that everything is ready to go for your class. We also have the South Mutts renovation, which is the gross anatomy lab, and I was really nervous about this. When you think that the very first day of class is August 13th, and they're telling me that this is going to be done July 30th, you know, how many times have you worked with deadlines where, you know, it just didn't happen? And I've been going up there every other day, just kind of peeking in. They're like, yeah, we're on track, we're on track. So, and they're doing an awesome job. They got the whole thing shelled out. They're a little ahead of schedule right now. So it'll definitely be ready and good to go by August. The library North Stacks is being relocated right now. The creation of the active learning classroom will then take place between April and July. And then finally the center mutts, which is going to be those patient interaction rooms, they are going to progress and they should be ready right in time for the beginning of class. That August 12th date is a little concerning, but then again, we also didn't schedule any classes in that room for the first few weeks just in case. Goodness. So fun stuff. I've kind of covered a lot of curriculum stuff, and then I've gotten into a bunch of the renovations, which is really awesome. You're basically going to be moving into a facility that is completely overhauled, which is going to be sweet. What questions do you have for me at this point? Yeah.
How big would the groups be for like the problem-based learning and the anatomy groups?
The question is, how big will the groups be? So the dissection lab groups will be 6 students each, and then the problem-based learning groups or the team-based learning groups need to have an odd number, so usually it's 7. And that's because you pose problems to a group, and then they kind of wrestle with it, and they have to come up with an answer, and sometimes the grade is dependent on how the group does. And if you have 6 people and 3 people want one thing and 3 want another, you can't just go to like the old arm wrestle thing. You got to have like an outcome. So you need an odd number to really do team-based learning well. So there'll be 7 students in the TBL groups and 6 in the lab. And as far as the lab goes, we've been very thoughtful in how we construct our lab groups. There's always at least one native Wisconsinite. There is an equal distribution of men and women in the teams. There's an even distribution of science and non-science majors in each of the teams. And we just tried this last year, and it really worked beautifully. The teams immediately felt like they were connected to the area because there was at least one person from the area on all the teams. The science folks were able to help some of the non-science folks early on to kind of get their sea legs. And so it really worked out well. As far as the male-female thing, I don't know how that really worked, but the whole thing worked smoothly. I just won't get into that issue right now. What other questions do you have for me? Yes?
So Dr. Franco stated earlier that the frequency of the team-based learning sessions will vary across classes, particularly in the first year.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea, like per week or just for each class, maybe like what percentage of the time would be, learning time would be in team-based?
It's a really good question. So what's going to be the percentage of time doing team-based learning? And I'll be honest, it's not going to be a ton at first. And that might be really a welcome thing for some folks. It might also be discouraging for others. We're approaching curriculum change as an evolution, so we didn't want to mandate anything in particular. And what we found is most courses will be using team-based learning a couple times a month. But then in the bench to bedside group, they're planning on using team-based learning almost exclusively. And then in some of the others, the Introduction to Clinical Medicine, they're thinking about using team-based learning kind of weekly. So if I had to guess, through the holistic view of all the classes together, I'd imagine team-based learning will be attempted a couple times a month throughout the first year. So it's not going to be nearly the extent that we had in our pilot curriculum. Good question. What else you got for me? Yeah.
How will that change for the second year? If, it's once a month for the first year, what about the second year?
That's much more of a black box, I'll be honest with you. So there's a lot of work that's been done about the second year. The second year is modeled more on the pilot experience, such that it's unit-based or systems-based. So you start out with musculoskeletal skin, then you go to cardiovascular, then you do renal, then GI, and so forth. And it's very integrated. So all the groups are coming together. We have representatives from pharmacology and micro and path and anatomy and cell biology and so on. They create these teams that have a focus in the organ system. And then they collaboratively work together to figure out how the units will roll out. At times, it will be more of an individual discipline will take over given days and concentrate on pharmacology. Other times it will be full team-based learning where it is an integration of all of the disciplines together. Because most of the patients that come in, they don't just have one problem, they have lots of issues that need to be dealt with. So the second year, it's not known. That's the best answer I can give you. We don't know how often team-based learning is going to be used. It will be much more integrated, I can tell you that for a fact. And I'd imagine the team-based learning component will probably be heavier than the first year, but we don't know. What else? Yes?
So I guess so the first year then is still pretty traditionally lecture-based? Since there's only a couple days a week you're doing the team-based, a couple days a month?
I would say that you probably are right. The first year is discipline-based. So we'll start with a gross anatomy course, a physiology course, and that molecules to cell course that Dr. Franco talked about. And then after the fall, we'll go into the spring semester where there'll be a pharmacology, a micro class, a neuroscience class, and then also bench to bedside and the human behavior and medicine. And all of those are individual courses. And the course director has the authority to deliver the course how they want to do that. And to be frank, the first year is going to be a relatively lecture-heavy experience with more clinical correlations thrown in. So you're right, there's going to be much more lecture than probably we will see in 5 years from now, because that's the easiest way to transition into a very strong curriculum, and it will therefore also be much more independent, such that if a student chooses not to go to lecture, they can do that. But we will probably have more lecture in the first year this coming August. And I believe that my time is up. Thank you so thank you so much for allowing me to say a few words, and I hope to see a lot of you in August.